All right, so thank you everyone for joining us. We're fortunate today to have Joey Windsor, Research Associate from the Kaplan Lab at the University of Calgary, leading us on a talk today on how to hack your writing for optimal knowledge translation.
Thank you so much. I'm glad everyone online can join me and everyone here in the room. So a little bit about me. My PhD is in linguistics, so I work in medicine. And my role in the lab is to take all of the knowledge that we generate in our lab and try to communicate it to a wide variety of stakeholders. So that could be non-governmental organizations that are trying to advocate to government. It can be clinicians and physicians. It can be people that are afflicted by any given disease or their caregivers. And the idea is I want the writing to be maximally accessible without losing any of the scientific quality. Now, I know the workshop today is mostly focused on grant writing. And so the tips and tricks I'm going to share can be used in writing grants, but I think they can just be used broadly in any aspect of writing, whether you're writing a grant, a policy, an abstract, a paper, or a presentation. There is this thought or prevalence in the literature that academic writing should be completely inaccessible unless you're in the inner circle. You should have a PhD in whatever topic you want to read. And we write in a way that reinforces that. We use a lot of industry-specific jargon, we use fancy words, we use complicated sentences, and we make it arcane and impenetrable to anyone outside of our discipline. And this doesn't matter if you have a PhD in English, or for a French audience, French literature. If you try to read a medical article, your PhD, even in language, might not help you actually understand what's going on in medicine or history or philosophy if it's written in a way that's designed to keep you out. So this comic here on the screen, Calvin and Hobbes are discussing the book report on Dick and Jane, the dynamics of interbeing and monological imperatives in Dick and Jane, a study in psychic transrelational gender modes. Academia, here I come. And that's exactly what we see. So to try and break that mold and make accessible writing, let's face it, if you're applying to SHRC, NSERC, or CIHR, you're not likely to have someone in your specific discipline or area reviewing your grant. You want your language to be accessible, while still sounding smart. So what we're going to do is reduce structure and conserve energy, exterminate zombies, who doesn't love killing zombies, and focus our readers' attention exactly where we want it. So the idea is that your reader is like a battery. They have a finite amount of energy, and they have to split that energy between two tasks. They have to parse the structure, and I'll get into what that means, and they have to interpret the meaning. If you can make one of these tasks easier, they have more energy to devote to the other. And you, as a writer, maybe not able to help them interpret the meaning, except when you focus their attention exactly where you want it, but you can make the structure easier for them to parse. So Judy Swan says, bad scientific writing is writing that requires a disproportionate amount of the reader's energy simply to figure out what it's all about. And I'll have some examples of that as we go through. So linguistically, this is a principle I'm going to ask you to accept. Sentences are hierarchically organized. So if we have a sentence like, he hit the dog with a stick, it's possible that he hit the dog who is holding a stick in his mouth, or using a stick, he hit the dog. And there's actually a linguistic structure that underlies this sentence. And we can figure out which of these two meanings we want with something called a pronoun replacement test. You don't need to know this. I just want to prove that sentences are hierarchically organized. So if we say, he hit the dog with a stick, and we mean the dog has a stick, our sentence can be transitioned to he hit it. Dog with a stick is a full noun phrase and it can be replaced by it. If we mean the version where he used a stick to hit a dog, our sentence becomes he hit it with a stick, because with a stick is outside of that small pocket that we can replace with it. Again, you don't have to know how the structure works. You just have to believe me that there is a structure to our sentences. Typically, we believe that these structures are binary branching, and the more complicated or longer a sentence gets, the more of those binary branches we need. So we want to conserve energy. Simpler sentences are better. When you're writing academically, sometimes you are going to have to write very long, very complicated sentences. My rule of thumb, if a sentence takes more than 3 lines on your word processor, you need to do something with it. That can be as simple as a semicolon or a colon or an em dash, but you might want to look and say, should this be 2 sentences or does it really need to be 1? I'm sorry, all of my examples are going to come from inflammatory bowel disease epidemiology, because that's the lab I work in, but I think you'll still be able to get the idea. So we have this example sentence. Further, our national estimates of inflammatory bowel disease include all patients with IBD. However, when we stratified by Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, 5.6% of the patients have unclassified IBD. Grammatically, that's a good sentence. But I've just introduced you to the fact that we stratified our analysis by 2 things, and then told you a third thing that I didn't mention has 5.6% of that. That's not a simple sentence. That's going to take a lot of work for somebody, even somebody in the area, to go, wait, where did unclassified come from? So we can make it a lot simpler. Further, our national estimates of IBD include all patients with IBD, including 5.6% with unclassified IBD. I'm not making you think of 3 different things. Keeping connected items closer together is also going to help someone parse the structure. They don't have to think of something else in between, and then remember what the first thought was because they're closer together. So similarly, I can say the highest prevalence and average annual % change is found within the elderly group, those aged 60 or above, at 1.37% and 3.24% respectively. I've introduced what we're talking about, then told you what group we're talking about, and then gave you statistics that relate to the first thing we were talking about. I can change that to move the elderly thing, frame the sentence topic, the elderly group displayed. Now talk about what our statistics are going to say. The highest prevalence and average annual % change at 1.37 and 3.24% respectively. You can change that again, and you can put prevalence at 1.37% and average annual % change at 3.24%. That way, so the statistic immediately follows what you're talking about, and that makes it a little clearer again. But language is fluid. You want to be able to have a little variability. So this is an acceptable change just to bring them closer. Once something is parsed, so once you've figured out what the structure is and you've understood the meaning, you basically get it for free every other time. So if you have multiple sentences, in Canada in 2023, the prevalence of IBD was X percent realized the incidence of IBD in 2023. You can switch that around, so you use the exact same sentence frame and just, I'm no longer talking about prevalence, I'm talking about incidence. The percentage or the statistic was X, the statistic was Y. If you keep the exact same sentence structure, your readers don't have to parse it again. They've already understood the structure, so they get it for free. They're just getting straight to the meaning of that. And we can do little tricks to help that within our sentence. In the study, we analyze and correlate. Okay, sorry. Will allow healthcare, there should have been extra animations there. All right, you can kind of see it. In the study, we analyze and correlate. These are both verbs. Once they figure out they're talking about a verb, the next verb is free. You don't have to parse it. Predictive factors of Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis, noun phrases, to yield important and obvious, both adjectives, conclusions. So because I'm pairing like and like constantly, you're getting at the structure a little faster. So if we take a sentence like, or half a sentence like, this will allow healthcare providers to implement clinical and policy interventions. This is microscopic in terms of processing time, it's milliseconds, but clinical is an adjective and policy interventions is a noun. So I've asked you to parse two different grammatical structures. We can change that to will allow healthcare providers to implement clinical practices and policy interventions, which are both noun phrases. And you get that, again, it's milliseconds, but over 9,000, 10,000 words in an essay, or how many pages in a grant. The last CIHR grant our lab did was 125 pages. Those milliseconds add up. Similar to priming is the rule of one variable. And this means limit how much you change when you're comparing two things. If I ask you to, I say, the Liberal leader of Canada is Justin Trudeau, who did something someday. Conversely, Pierre Poilievre, leader of blah, blah, blah. I'm changing the person, I'm changing the party, and if I'm no longer talking about politics, but reactions, I've changed a lot of things. So this is one of my most hated sentences I have ever found. I still can't actually get through this. In the 10 nations with the largest online populations, non-domestic news sites represent less than 8% of the 50 most visited news sites, while in France, 98% of all visits to news sources are directed to domestic sites. Did anyone actually understand that? It's a grammatical sentence, but what it said is, in the 10 nations with the largest online populations, non-domestic news sites represent less than 8% of the 50 most visited sites. In France, just 2%. And the problem is they've switched the topic from non-domestic traffic to domestic traffic, and they're trying to get you to do mental gymnastics to follow the logic of their sentence. If you keep it to one variable, we're going to only talk about non-domestic. Now we can actually compare 8% versus 2%. Does anyone have any questions before we start talking about zombies? No, good. Ready. Okay. What do we want? Oh, that should have replaced. Not all of my animations are working. The ingestion of brains. No, we just want brains. The ingestion of brains is something we call a zombie noun. It's a noun that has gone through a bunch of linguistic processes just to make it more complicated with no actual substance. One tactic to elevate writing, and this is that arcane, impenetrable language that I was talking about at the beginning, is by using something called nominalizations. Nominalizations take an adjective or a verb and they turn it into a noun, and we call that a zombie noun because they didn't actually do anything other than obfuscate the true meaning. So Judy Swan gave me this sentence. The proliferation of nominalizations in a discursive formation may be an indication of a tendency towards pomposity and abstraction. This is a perfectly grammatical sentence. But did you understand it? Writers who overload their sentences with nominalization tend to sound pompous and abstract. That's the translation. But all of those italicized words are zombie nouns, and we want to try and eliminate them. They do serve a purpose. You can use them occasionally, but in scientific writing, we tend to think that big words make us sound smarter, so we overload them. We throw them in every time, And usually, if you're writing a grant, you have a word count you have to be under. And if you go through, almost every one of your nominalizations is going to be 3 or 4 words. Whereas just using a noun, you can just use 1 word. Or if you need a verb, but you've turned it into a noun, you can replace the act of usage upon treatment for IBD to using treatment. The act of usage, using. Zombie nouns require structural manipulation. This is that structure that we were talking about at the beginning that I asked you to believe me actually exists. So if we take a topic like vaccines prevent disease, here's our sentence. A noun, a verb, a noun, a subject, a verb, an object. Vaccines prevent disease. Vaccines for disease prevention, nominalization or zombie noun, are effective. Can't fit it on the page. Just as bad, even within a noun, vaccines prevent disease versus vaccination prevents disease. Vaccination, one of my most hated words, is a noun that takes the ate suffix to become a verb, vaccinate, and then takes another suffix, shun, just to become a noun again. You've added 3 layers of structure to turn a noun into a verb back into a noun, just to make yourself sound smart and make it harder to read. Just say vaccines prevent disease. And this is what zombie nouns do. And they're so prolific throughout academic writing. They're everywhere. So what I've been saying is we have all these grammatical rules. I've been throwing adjective, noun, verb at you, and I hope you remember grade 8 English. Most of us don't. Most of us don't think about nouns and verbs. But if you think back to that grade 8 English class, I'm sure you had the teacher at the front of the room saying, never strand a preposition. Well, if that were true, you wouldn't be able to say she took it down. Down is a preposition. Can't end a sentence with a preposition. So you have to say, she took it. Winston Churchill famously said, that is the sort of pomposity up with which I will not put. Grammatical rules are not absolute, and a lot of these types of grammatical rules come from people who think we should still be speaking Latin, and you couldn't do this in Latin. Never split infinitive. Well, to boldly go where no one has gone before should never be said, because you can't put an adverb in between to go. Again, because in Latin you couldn't, it was a single word. Avoid the passive voice. Has anybody been told in your writing, be active? A robust antibody response was observed. Sometimes you just have to say something was observed. A team did it. You don't always have to say, we observed it. You can just say, it was observed. The passive voice exists because it's a useful tool. I wouldn't want to read your grant or your paper if it was all the passive voice, but it's a tool that you can use. And at least in my training, we were always told avoid the first person singular. You should never say I. Even if you are doing a single authored grant or paper, it would be we, the royal we. No, you can absolutely say, I observed a robust antibody response. And, you know, the subject of my ire, maybe never use a zombie noun. No, the data displayed a high rate of vaccination in these seniors. In this case, you can't say vaccines among the seniors. You are really talking about a vaccination rate or a vaccination program. Vaccination is the correct word to use here in context, even if it did have to go through all that structure. So no grammatical rules are absolute. You just, everything in moderation. I'm going through a lot before we're talking about focusing readers' attention. Any questions? Good. Okay. So maybe this is a medicine scenario, but there's probably something similar in all disciplines. We do something called systematic reviews, where we get hundreds, if not thousands of papers, and we skim them for the useful information that we want to pull out and do a meta-analysis. So we're reading papers at the full text stage, get to the methods section to do the study assessment. Is the study actually population based? Is it a representative sample, or is it a case series of a few people? You read through the methods, you read through them again, you still don't find it, and then you glance down at the results section, and there's a sentence. In this population-based national cohort study, a group of da-da-da-da-da-da. Why did you put that in the results section? Why do I have to read your entire paper to find something that should be in the methods? I want to know what method you use. In a highly structured document, this violates your reader expectations, and it can be really frustrating. Capitalizing on where a reader expects something to occur can help put their attention where you want it to be. Or a German native who writes in English. I think I might have missed that comment earlier. It might have pertained to something else.
I closed it.
Oh, thank you. So Judy Swan provides 4 cues for predicting where a reader will place emphasis based on structure. Depending on how ruthless your editor,
Did your PowerPoint disappear?
I think it did.
Unmute myself.
If you open up the, no, go to the.
I can't find the Zoom controls on this computer to share screens.
Let it on.
If you go to my drive, sorry, go back to where you were, and then. Oh, you know, you can mute yourself on this laptop.
I can't find the, oh, there it is.
So go back to the Google Drive. It should be saved in there.
On the Zoom link, because that'll bring it to you.
Everything should be in my drive. So let's see.
But I should be the one sharing, shouldn't I?
There, go to RIC 2023 annual meeting. Move your mouse up. Yep. Go to day 2. Go to how to happy writing it. You got it. And then the second one there. This one. Yep.
Right,
So you're
but
gonna be
I'm
the-
still sharing, so, or I should still be sharing.
You could also here, if I can step in for a second. I can
Please.
see it. Oh, weird though, like it is on your screen.
Yeah.
Okay, then I don't know, maybe. Let's close it and try again. Okay, and
There. This one. Okay. And
I'll stop.
yes, okay. Oh,
So just-
and then you go back to Zoom.
Yep.
So that little window should be next. It's there. Sorry, everyone online, we are getting
No,
this
they're
figured out.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Okay. Judy Swan provides 4 places where a reader's going to focus your emphasis. If you have a ruthless editor, me, for example, and you're someone who likes to bold your words and italicize your words to say, hey, look at me, I'm important, I'm going to undo all that formatting, because words in a different language like et al or et sequential will be italicized, but you can build your sentence in a way that the emphasis will come through without italics and bolding. So Judy Swan says in a main clause, we'll get into that, at the end of sentences, following long buildups and in repeated instances. Readers are going to focus their attention there. So a left dislocation, and you don't have to know what this means, is a syntactic operation that allows you to move information to the left. And there's a reason you might want to do this. You don't want the bad information at the end of your sentence, because your reader's going to remember the bad information. If you're writing a grant and you say, our results show, hey, amazing, although cast doubt on my own analysis, the reviewer for your grant is going to go, oh yeah, there was some doubt with that analysis, wasn't there? But if you go, although maybe this didn't work out, hey, look what we found. They're going to concentrate at the end of the sentence. They're going to like, yeah, this person found some amazing stuff. And that's what's going to stick with them while they're reviewing your grant. So let's do a real-time experiment. I just want you to think about your reaction to 4 sentences. It's going to be basically the same sentence, but just the order manipulated a little bit. And I want you to think about how you feel about Fred. Okay, just keep it to yourself, and then I'll show you what I expected your reactions would be, and you tell me if they line up. Although Fred's a nice guy, he yells at his dog. Although Fred yells at his dog, he's a nice guy. Fred's a nice guy, but he yells at his dog. Fred yells at his dog, but he's a nice guy. Have a scale in your mind of how you think of Fred in each of these? Is it that scale? Yeah. I dislocated the bad information, presented that to you, and then gave you an alternate where the lasting memory is he's a nice guy. So even if he yells at his dog, he's a nice guy. But if I present that information in any other order, you're not so convinced about it. And we can make this even better if you really want to stack your odds. Fred is a good husband, a caring father, a fine colleague, and an altogether nice guy, even if he yells at his dog. Even though he yells at his dog, Fred is a good husband, a caring father, a fine colleague, and an altogether nice guy. Great. What was that bad thing again that I said before that long build up and at the end of the sentence? So you can really put your reader's focus where you want it and get them to retain the information that you want them to retain. I think I probably have to go a little faster, don't I?
Yeah, I think we have about 3 minutes.
Okay. I'm going to skip over some of this, which is just the focus. All right. To attract a reader's attention where you want it and get them to focus, you can add weight. And kind of the freebies for weight are things like adjectives, adverbs, and series of 3. These are kind of freebies. So rather than saying someone with IBD might also have ankylosing spondylitis and PSC, you can add a third thing: rheumatoid arthritis, ankylosing spondylitis, or PSC. Series of 3 are psychologically satisfying for the reader. And even if you have to kind of artificially pad your list, it's more pleasing to the reader. And you can add adjectives. This is the crucial moment at which we need a major investment from government, industry, and the public to fund clinical and laboratory, just some 3 adjectives, research in order to explain the origin of chronic inflammatory diseases and foster strategies to prevent disease. We don't need the zombie there. So why do we prefer 3 adjectives to 1 zombie? Because I was saying we don't want extra structure. It's going to make it harder to read. These are freebies. The ball, not a full sentence. We need something there. We need to know who threw it. Jessica the ball, not a sentence. We need a verb there. I can't tell you as an editor how many times I see a sentence that is just the subject of the sentence. The writer never gets to a verb. Drives me nuts. But they get so lost in such a complicated subject that they're like, oh yeah, I've already talked about it. Next sentence. But they never have. Jessica threw. What? Right? Not a good sentence. Jessica threw the ball. All of those elements are needed. Jessica heroically threw the small red bouncy ball. None of those are integral to the sentence. They're just one extra splice, and you get them kind of for free. And they allow you to add weight to what you need to add weight to. So you can go through these other lectures as needed. I don't know if RIC is going to make the slides available. Yeah. And this is recorded. The idea is simplify your sentences, Get rid of those zombies. I promise you, if you're a specialist in an area, you're going to sound smart, even if your sentences are one step above C, Jane, run. Right? You're going to sound smart because you know what you're talking about. And then rely on your writing to really focus the reader's attention where you want it. You don't have to use little visual tricks or anything like that. You can rely on recall bias. The thing at the end of the sentence is going to be what's recalled to make sure they get the information that they want. Sorry, I had to skip over a few things and go a little fast there at the end. Are there any questions or anything like that? I know it's a lot of information.
They're still finishing up the other session, so we definitely have to questions.
And I'm sure I can look on the online chat if I see there are.
You're just getting you're just getting some kudos.
Stephen Pinker. Yeah, I'm always a little cautious when I add Stephen Pinker because I think he's someone who got canceled recently. But as a linguist, he does know a lot, and he's written extensively on style and how to make your writing accessible, and he's very knowledgeable in that area.
Do you think there's ever a time and a place where you can make your writing, like if the specific audience calls for it? Like, I mean, if we have a knowledge mobilization product that's made specifically for research in that field, do you think there is a specific time and place where we can use kind of those longer words and some of those zombie nouns? Or do you think it'd be better to take it down a notch and let them refer to it?
In my opinion, and this is opinion, a group of specialists are going to get through your arcane. Right? They're going to understand it, but you never want somebody to feel like your writing is a slog to get through. Okay. Even if they understand every word, simplifying the sentences is going to help them get through it, and it's going to be a more pleasurable experience for them. Further, globally, our efforts are on open access research right now, and even if you don't bury your research behind a paywall, if you bury it behind arcane industry specific jargon, you're effectively cutting off the public anyway. So I would say 100% of the time, make your writing accessible.
Okay.
I might follow up with you over email. I'm curious to know if, as AI is starting to, and it's, I assume, the fairly early days around its ability to synthesize, and whether it holds any hope for synthesis, whether it's something that we can rely on.
Yeah, so right now ChatGPT writes at an 8th grade level, and if you've ever written a lay abstract for a journal, they ask you to write it at an 8th grade level. I can rant about the formula for what makes it 8th grade. It's a 1930s mathematical formula that counts syllables relative to words and words relative to sentences. So you can put anti-disestablishmentarianism in it. You have the higher syllable count and you have a short sentence. So ChatGPT is not quite up to the standard of academic writing, even with simple academic writing. But Lindsay and I, or I should say Lindsay with my prompt, put one of my papers into ChatGPT and said, summarize this for me. And it was a good summary. There were a few things that were off, but it was a useful tool to summarize. If you want,
even as a first draft, like where it's like, oh, here's the starting point for a lay summary, and then it can be.
You're right, it's early days. Who knows what's going to happen in the future? I would treat it like Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a great place to start research because you can follow the citation tree and get back to original sources. If you got ChatGPT to summarize some field for you, you could look at the insights and then properly source them.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Very well, appreciate it.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you. I think, you know, working in the field of knowledge mobilization, we're constantly trying to think about, we have to take ourselves out of the space of the, you know, discipline that we work in and think about how does this apply to other people, and how is somebody who's not gonna be a subject matter expert, gonna understand this, because, you know, we're trying to market our information, not just to our population, but to the public and government and policymakers. So I think you hit on some really good points, that we have to take a step back from our work and read it with like a new set of eyes, and yes, thank you.
I will say, and I'll talk about this afternoon in sort of the roundtable cafe. Sometimes you can't escape jargon. If you need to talk about down-regulating cytokines, sometimes you just need a glossary.
Yeah.
But you can hopefully simplify the rest of the sentence where people are encouraged enough to go to a dictionary or look up a word if they need to.
That's kind of like the journey that you take in your writing to get to those complicated words. As long as somebody can, you know, understand the path and you're not overcomplicating it, then that's probably your primary goal. Yeah, great.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you to everyone online, everyone here.
Thank you.